So what was all that nonsense about Danielle Hunter getting paid his big old roster bonus? What happened here? It kind of got confusing this weekend. We'll talk about that and Adam Thielen's pay cut here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Today on the show, we got to talk about this Danielle Hunter thing. It got really confusing over the weekend. A whole bunch of people have no idea how the contract worked or what happened on Sunday. Sunday had a sort of important deadline for Danielle Hunter's contract. We talked about it Friday. I want to update on that conversation. And also, Adam Thielen took a pay cut this weekend, which was also news. So we'll talk about that too, as well as whatever else comes up. So let me get into the Danielle Hunter thing. So on Saturday, Adam Schefter tweeted that the Vikings aren't going to do anything about the roster bonus. They're going to pay it. And that was that was the thing. So if you missed it, we've talked a lot about Danielle Hunter on this show. So if you have been listening for the last month or so, this is probably going to be a little repetitive to you. But if not, here's the deal with Danielle Hunter's contract. He has a big, scary $26 million cap hit this year and an $8 million cap hit next year. That's pretty imbalanced, but a whole bunch of it is tied up in a roster bonus. 18 million of it is in a roster bonus, which means if the Vikings had cut Danielle Hunter on Thursday, he wouldn't have seen a dime of that. It actually would have been a pretty cheap cut. And that was an option that was available to them. That is no longer available to them because on Sunday, that big old roster bonus became guaranteed. Now, what that means has been weirdly the subject of heavy debate. The Vikings beat was very confused about what that meant, especially the way that Schefter worded the tweet. And to be honest with you, wording is going to be really important in this show today. So I'm going to read you all the stuff exactly. So Adam Schefter's tweet reads, Vikings defensive end Danielle Hunter has an $18 million roster bonus due today, and barring an unforeseen change, Minnesota plans to pay it and tie the two-time Pro Bowl selection to its team for the remaining 2 years of his contract, per league source. So the important part to take out of that is they are going to pay the roster bonus. They're going to let it become guaranteed. Danielle Hunter's going to see that money. And when that tweet happened, a lot of the Vikings beat, the beat reporters, the Star Tribune, Pioneer Press, all those people started to kind of get really confused. It's wait, they're not going to do anything with that big giant roster bonus? That has been the reporting. And I think just about everyone, I've done 6 podcasts on the thing. I think everybody's written at least one article, has been about how maybe they need to cut him over this. Maybe they need to trade him over this. Maybe what's going to happen here. I've been saying to restructure the roster bonus. And that Schefter tweet read they just weren't going to do anything. And a lot of people were under the impression that if they didn't do anything by yesterday, Sunday, that they won't be able to do anything. And that 18 million will just be stuck now as a big giant cap hit and they just have to take it. And some people even I think Eric Eager actually argued that that's a good idea. Get all the payment out of the way so that you have a much cheaper cap hit next year. And there's some merit to that. But neither here nor there, that's not quite the way this works. So Ben Gessling then chimed in and he said, a couple things to know about Danielle Hunter's $18 million roster bonus. While it becomes guaranteed this weekend, he still has to report to training camp on time to earn it. First $6 million paid within the 10 days of the camp report date. Vikings still have the right to convert it to signing bonus at any time. And then actually included the contract language. Player and club agree that during the duration of this contract, club shall have the right but not the obligation to convert any portion of player's 2022 roster bonus into signing bonus. So the headline of what is important to understand is that the Vikings still can do the restructure and they could make up to $13.5 million in cap space by restructuring that roster bonus. They don't have to do exactly that much. They could do a more conservative restructure if they want to do, but they can make up to $13.5 million of cap space with that restructure. And it's the kind of restructure that is already consented to in the language of the contract. The Vikings can just do that. And Danielle Hunter has basically already agreed that it's okay for the Vikings to do that whenever they want. But then Jason at Over the Cap, who does a podcast, really vehemently thinks that the Vikings can't do that they can't change it to signing bonus, and disagreed with Ben Gessling's reporting, which is interesting because Gessling isn't talking about like his understanding of the rules. He's reporting language in the actual deal. But Jason's point, Jason Fitzgerald, was more about how once a roster bonus is earned, which is what I think Jason thought happened this weekend, if it's earned money, once that money has been like paid out, you can't convert it to signing bonus to change the way the cap accounts for it. And so he says, no, I think you can't convert it to signing bonus. This is how annoying this weekend was, by the way. If this stuff bores the hell out of you, you might want to skip to the next segment because it's going to be like this. So the difference is whether or not Danielle Hunter has actually earned the bonus, and he has not yet earned the bonus because of that holdout thing that happened, that he has to show up to camp to get the money, and the first $6 million will be paid within 10 days of the camp report date. That's a clause in there to basically prevent him from holding out after getting a big giant roster bonus, then holding out and saying, I want more money, and you can kind of hold the whole thing hostage. He can't do that. He has to report to camp to see his roster bonus. But otherwise, his roster bonus became guaranteed on the 19th. It became guaranteed. So he has not yet received the bonus, and therefore it can be converted. That's my understanding of things. Once he actually gets the money in training camp, then it all locks in and it can't be converted. You couldn't sit there in week 9 and start converting salary to signing bonus to kick cap down the road. You have to make that decision before you actually pay it out. That's what Jason was talking about, and I think he just thought that the roster bonus was actually earned instead of just becoming guaranteed, and I think that's where the miscommunication happened. So my understanding of it is, yes, they can still convert it to signing bonus. I'm a little bit more unclear. I talked about it on Friday, and I thought I was wrong, and then I thought it was right, and now I'm just kind of unclear on if roster bonus, once it's become guaranteed, travels with Danielle Hunter if he gets traded. The Vikings could still trade Danielle Hunter. If the roster bonus doesn't travel with him, obviously it becomes a lot less likely. Otherwise, it's just as likely as it always was, which still feels not that likely. It feels like the Vikings have a really high asking price, and somebody would have to, like, if somebody was willing to offer what the Vikings want, that probably would have happened already. I think they've received the calls they're going to receive, and I don't know if anybody's going to change their mind as drastically as it would take. So all this is to say, I would anticipate that Danielle Hunter is a Viking in 2022. It's not guaranteed by any sense. He's not going to get cut. That was always going to be the stupidest option. But he could still get extended or restructured. I guess there's maybe a chance of a trade if my understanding of the cap is correct, and I don't know if I understand that particular part well enough. So maybe there's a chance at maybe getting traded, but it's slow. He's probably going to be a Viking. So where do we go from here with regard to this contract? What happens now? Well, nothing could happen. They might not do anything, or they might just do things kind of with a more long-term lens. They might sign a player and then restructure when that player is signed, restructure exactly as much money as they need to restructure to make that signing. And that means that, again, like I kind of said on Friday, here we are in the long game. So I want to talk about the Adam Thielen thing, and I want to talk a little bit about that money strategy, and then we'll do Mock Draft Monday at the end of the show as well. First things first, though, let me talk to you about Built Bar. It's the best tasting protein bar on the planet. Built Bar's covered in 100% chocolate. Comes in a bunch of delicious flavors like chocolate raspberry or chocolate mint brownie or cookies and cream, chocolate caramel. Or you can get their Built Puffs, which is delicious. They're like the marshmallowy kind. I don't know how they do it. This is a protein bar. I mean, it's mostly collagen protein in there, and it's got like 4 grams of sugar and like 130 calories. Compare that to like a real candy bar is like 30 grams of sugar and like 300 calories, and it's just disgusting. This is the kind of thing that'll satisfy that craving. Tastes like marshmallow. I don't know how they whipped up the collagen protein or whatever to make it taste like actual marshmallow. It's magic, but it's awesome. And you got like 17 grams of protein in one of these bad boys. So head on over to built.com, and whatever you buy, enter promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you can get 15% off of your order. That's LOCKED15, all one word, at built.com. Hey, the Locked On NFL podcast is on YouTube. You can find my ugly mug over there every Tuesday if you want to go check that out. But go check it out on YouTube, or if you're not into YouTube, you can find it wherever you find your favorite shows. Let's talk about Adam Thielen real quick, and then the money strategy in general before we get to Mock Draft Monday. So Adam Thielen over the weekend agreed to a pay cut, and it was specified in the reporting it is a pay cut that he had to agree to. If you remember a couple weeks ago, if you were here on the show, I did a bunch of mock off seasons where I like made cap space, did free agency, did a mock draft and stuff, and in all of those, or in a lot of those, I did a restructure of Adam Thielen's contract. I did not do a pay cut of Adam Thielen because I kind of felt like it would be cheating a little bit to just be like, yeah, he'll just agree to take less. That's fine. But obviously the Vikings can ask him and he can do it. And he seemed happy to take the pay cut and rework his deal. I think they tacked a void year into it or something, converted a little bit of signing bonus, but he also makes less money every year. So they created, I think, like $6 million in cap space doing it. And they also took a little bit of money off of future years as well. So he makes 11 or 12 million a year, where before it was going to be like 16 or something insane. So the details of that, I don't believe are out yet. I certainly, at least as of this recording, I do not know what the exact numbers are, but Adam Thielen took a pay cut, and that is where that contract probably ends. More can be restructured. If you need to, you can take it all bit by bit or whatever. But that kind of leads me to the next thing, which is Kwesi's strategy. He's being very Wall Street about this, which, like, well, yeah, we probably could have seen that coming. But basically, think about being like a capital investor, like a stockbroker. Think about being one of these Wall Street suits, and imagine your strategy. So you got $10 million of capital tied up in a bunch of different investments, and you come in for the week and you say, I think I'm going to end up investing in about $1 million worth of stuff. Would you come in on Monday and divest $1 million so you have that money right with you to spend? Probably not. Like, if you were to ask a Wall Street person, they don't want their money to be liquid for more than a nanosecond. They want to take it out of one thing and immediately put it into the other. And that's because when you're investing, your money is like growing and stuff. So as long as it's sitting in a bank account, it's not doing anything and you're losing money. That doesn't quite translate to the NFL. That's why they want to do it. But that's kind of the mentality. And it's clear that Kwesi has kind of picked up that mentality about money from those days where you don't want to liquidate your money or withdraw your money, meaning you don't want to make that cap space before like the day you need it. And although, having your money spent on something doesn't make your money grow in the NFL like it does on Wall Street, there's still an advantage to this, and it's informational, right? You walk in to a week of work as a capital gains investor and you say, I think I'm going to make about $1 million of investments this week. You take out that money, and if you miss high, if you only end up making, $500,000 in investments that week, you have now taken out more money than you need to take out, and you need to reinvest it in something. But what if there isn't as efficient of an investment available? You kind of screwed yourself, right? Why didn't you wait to withdraw that money till you actually needed it? And I think the same kind of applies here. And it's something that Rick didn't do as much. He did some. I mean, he would push things as much as he could. And of course, there are some things you just can't push, right? Like you had to do something like release Michael Pierce because I think a bunch of his money would have been guaranteed this week if they didn't do that. So you have to make some of those decisions ahead of time. But for the ones you don't have to make ahead of time, like salary conversion restructures that prorate money and kick it down the road, you don't necessarily have to do that one right away. So this is going to lead to what might be a really frustrating offseason for fans because we don't know how much they plan to spend, and we're not going to know how much they plan to spend until it's too late to spend anymore, and then we just know how much they spend. But it doesn't prevent you from negotiating with a free agent, right? The Vikings have been in on several free agents. They've tried, and sometimes they get outbid, but they get outbid not because they don't have the space. They could make the space for anything, but at a certain point, it becomes, I don't want to spend that on you. Darius Williams, this is now richer than I want to go for this, so congrats, Jags, you did it. But, I mean, at the drop of a hat, with just restructures, simple restructures, the Vikings could still make like $30 million right away. So they have, I don't want them to be able to hide behind cap space as a reason they didn't sign this person or that person. It was a decision that they made. So if you see someone, and there are some offensive linemen that go around that get pretty cheap, you see somebody sign for $2.5 million and you say, man, I wish the Vikings had done that. It's not that they wanted to do it too, but just didn't have the room. They didn't want to do it. They didn't agree with you. And there's merit and validity to that. And that's just like how we have to approach this. But it is like a very Wall Street way to do things. And I like the advantages of that, right? If you make $30 million of cap space right now, and then you only end up spending $15 million of it, sure, some of that cap rolls over. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But really, you just did something kind of inefficient. You made more space than you're going to use. And either you end up spending that money on a player who maybe you wouldn't have otherwise spent. You might end up going and making a deal that you like less because you had extra money available. Like you might go and do that, or you won't do anything and the money just rolls over. And you might think, oh, well, then that's fine. Like the cap rolls over to next year, you can use it next year. That's totally fine. But one way to check if a thing is matters or not is if the team were forced to do that, would we be like, good thing? Nah, right? Like what if they got in trouble, they broke some rule, and their punishment was that they had to take $20 million of cap out of this year and move it to next year? That would suck, right? You just start getting deferred and you can't actually move your cap. You can't actually use your cap until a year from now. You just have to wait for it. And yeah, that means next year is going to be that much better, but you had to wait so much for it that you probably would have had to do things this year that you otherwise wouldn't have done. And there's a chain reaction to it. So yes, the cap rolls over, but that still is not preferable to just not having to make the move in the first place. So all this is to say, I think it's a really smart way to approach things, and it's not one I thought about a lot when Rick was the GM, because he wouldn't necessarily do it as much, as aggressively, I guess, as Kwesi is doing that. And I like it. I think it's good. Cool idea to just be very decisive and say, all right, here we are. You're the free agent. We'll sign you to a $6 million deal. And we'll process that tomorrow. So go get stakes on us and come on in tomorrow and sign the contract. We got to go restructure a contract real quick to make room for it. And that's a perfectly fine place to negotiate. I don't think that's a weaker negotiating position or anything like that. So I think it's a perfectly fine way to go about it. And you can then be very exact. Like imagine you can travel in time. You can go all the way to September, week 1, and say, okay, this is what we ended up spending. And you know what the Vikings ended up spending on free agents, and you can take that number, you can go back and tell it to Kwesi right now and say, make exactly this much space. That would be a powerful tool, right? And this is sort of a way to approximate that. So let's move on to Mock Draft Monday. It's more earnest draft season now. I'll cover free agency things as they kind of still trickle in here. The big wave is over. Doesn't mean the Vikings are done, and I do definitely think they're going to sign players. I think they have to, because the defense is in just such a bad way right now. I mean, they don't have a secondary at all, but we'll get to them when we get to them. And in the meantime, let's just start talking about prospects. So that means a couple of really cool things. That means Mock Draft Mondays are going to start to expand a little bit more. Before too long, we'll be making Monday shows entirely mock drafts. And we'll be doing trades. We'll be doing all the way 7 rounds, the whole deal. That also means we might start pretty soon here Prospect Today, which is another way for me to get to know prospects every day. Just look up a draft prospect. It could be one I like. It could be one I don't like. It could be one I think I can't decide on and is interesting. It could be a 3rd rounder or a 7th rounder or a blue chip player. It could be anything. And we just talk about one every day. That's it. Prospect Today. Great way to get to know the draft board. And that's kind of my goal for the draft too. I mean, there's 250 people in the draft. I'm not going to be able to cover all of them in depth, but I can at least talk about the ones the Vikings are probably looking at, and I can talk about the higher round guys and try to get you at least so that you're following everything that's going on comprehensively and understanding every player for the first 3 rounds. And then day 3 gets a little tougher, but we'll talk about day 3 too. So that is draft season. You can bet on draft stuff. You can bet on who the first overall pick will be. You can bet on how many trades there will be, that kind of thing. You can bet on all of that stuff at betonline.net. It's your one-stop shop for all things Grambling. Of course, look, it's March Madness. That's what you're gambling on right now. But you can also bet on baseball futures. You can bet on pro basketball or pro hockey. You can bet on soccer, tennis, MMA, even your favorite Vegas casino games. You can gamble on whatever you want at betonline.net. You can do their player props builder to put together all your weird parlays. I know everybody likes to do that. You can do a live betting thing. Is that team going to make a comeback after halftime? That kind of thing. You can go through their live betting module, which is super cool, and it updates every 2 seconds. It's really sick. So go check all that stuff out at betonline.net, where the game starts. All right. Here we go with Mock Draft Monday. Vikings are sitting at 12th. And one of the things I want to start doing with these is to start looking at the shape of the board typically as they develop coming up to the Vikings. And really what I'm trying to figure out is, should the Vikings trade up this year? Trade-ups are a little bit of an inefficient move. You have to swim upstream a little bit. The actual historical value of draft picks versus what draft picks actually go for in trades doesn't perfectly align. And basically, if you have a trade, the team that trades down more often ends up better off than the team that traded up by a pretty significant margin. So trading up is one of those things that, value-wise, law of averages is not going to be that great of a thing. But sometimes there's a player. And the way I think of it is, think about a talent cliff, right? And instead of thinking the first player, the second player, the third player, think of them in points, right? Think of them as 0 to 300 points. And the top 5 players all have 295 points. And then there's a big cliff and the next player only has 200 points. Then that cliff might be worth jumping up, even though it's inefficient to trade up. It might be inefficient on this board, and really you're looking for talent cliffs. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for talent cliffs. Who are the players that are always gone, and would I want any of them? So some of those players are guys way out. Kyle Hamilton's always in the top 5. Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal is always way out there. Ikem Ekwonu, always way out of. These guys are I think a little bit too far out of the way. But there are people who I've actually taken in previous mock draft Mondays, like Jameson Williams, or I haven't taken Travon Walker, but he's an interesting name too. In this particular simulation, he went 9th. So I've got the draft paused at 10th. I could trade up with the Jets right now for just 2 spots. Sauce Gardner is on the board. Jordan Davis is on the board. George Karlaftis is on the board. Tyler Linderbaum is on the board. A lot of people really like him. By the way, Mock Draft Monday, usually I have a rule that says, you can't pick a guy you've taken in a previous one. I'm resetting the pool. So everybody's on here, totally resetting the pool for earnest draft season. There are enough players here that I'm really, really into that I have absolutely no problem letting 2 more picks go off the board. For your information, Sauce Gardner and Trevor Penning were the 2 picks there. But I am going to pick here. I'm not very interested in trading down in this particular one. And what I really need is a corner. That's what I really need. They are so broken at corner right now. They've got Chris Boyd playing CB2, Cameron Dantzler playing CB1. And even if they get a free agent, it's going to be a Patrick Peterson tier free agent. And it's only one guy. They still need to rebuild the rest of the room. So cornerback wise, the 2 that are available in the kind of big 3 that we always talk about are Derek Stingley and Andrew Booth. Andrew Booth is seen to be, I don't think he's quite as popular as Stingley, but in the interest of getting to know him, I'm going to take him. And I'm going to be honest, I agree with that. If I were actually drafting here, I'd probably rather take Stingley, but let's get to know him. This is the point of this, right? I'm not just trying to come up with the best draft every time. I'm trying to get to know players and explore the board. So Booth is smaller. But he plays bigger than he is. And there's a lot of players like that are, corners that you can make a living at 5'11" if you play big. So he's 6 foot even, 195. Yeah, it's a little smaller than you want, but it's certainly by no means a deal breaker if he's a total baller. And he's definitely got that dog mentality I always look for in cornerbacks. He's a fighter, that kind of thing. I want a scrappy corner that's got some pit bull in him, if you will. There are maturity concerns, I guess. He got ejected once for throwing a punch. He's a little bit he bites on a lot, so he's a little bit overexcited to go jump on a play or something, or maybe a little bit too aggressive. And that's okay. That's something you can coach out, but the problems are starting to mount, right? And the thing is, he seems like he's a guy that relies on his athleticism. And he is a very good athlete, although he did suffer an injury at the combine, so that's also a thing to look at here. But players who are reliant on their athleticism, not players who use their athleticism to make a play, but players who kind of bank on it, have a tougher time transitioning to the NFL, where their athleticism advantage is obviously going to diminish. Moving on to round 2, picking at pick number 46. I actually had a little moment where I thought about trading up about 10 spots. Zion Johnson was falling really far. It didn't end up working out. But there is a player that I'm actually kind of excited about, Jaquan Brisker. He's a safety. So we went corner safety. I'm rebuilding this damn secondary. This secondary is a mess, and I'm just trying to get to fix it. I'm pretty excited about Jaquan Brisker. He seems like he's a very plus athlete. 4'4", 940 is great for a safety, good broad jump and stuff. And he's long. He's 6'1", about 200 pounds. So he's like this kind of long, lean type of safety. And that he knows how to use that athleticism like responsibly. He's a good athlete laterally. I honestly think part of the reason he would be available in the second round is just because people aren't as hype on safeties as they are on like true outside corners. But he's like a really bursty kind of explode into the play kind of guy. And he's like super well-rounded. I think part of it too is he doesn't have like a kill pitch. You know, like some of the great MLB pitchers have their one pitch that's their thing. I don't know if Brisker has his, and that is something that might cause him to fall to round 2 and then not bother me at all one bit. That is exactly the kind of reason I want my guy falling around 2 if I'm going to take him in round 2. So I'm taking Jaquan Brisker, and I'm very excited about him. And then that brings me to pick number 77 as the simulation figures it out. Sometimes I am going to like keep an eye out here and see if I want to trade up. I'll pause, 10 picks before my pick, see if there is anything. Didn't happen to go that way this time. But I am definitely into it because this is not the kind of draft where we can afford to wait to the 4th round to pick everybody and then pick a bunch of projects. That was Rick Spielman's whole thing, and it didn't work, obviously, especially in 2021. He went way too far with it, where you wait to the later rounds, you get more picks in the later rounds, you pick super hyper athletes that are riskier, but because you got more picks, you can better withstand this risk. That was the thesis, and then they just went way too far with it, and they got guys that all had a 2% chance of working out, and I don't care if you have 2% chances, you're still probably not hit one. That was kind of how it broke for me. So I'm trying to avoid that and get more true contributors. I'm not trying to find the next Danielle Hunter here. I'm trying to find more like the next Eric Kendricks, just like a dude that's good at football. So in the interest of that, I'm actually going to trade up. Traded up to 73. All I had to do was switch a 5th and a 7th round pick with the Colts. So I took a 5th round pick, moved it down to the 7th, and then I move up a few spots in the 3rd round so that I could get Christian Watson, who was falling a little further than I think he normally would. So I kind of went up and got him, and he seemed like he was like by far the best player on the board, and there was kind of a big drop off to everybody else. So I went for him. He's North Dakota State wide receiver, super athletic. Really exciting guy. Seems to have a pretty cool skill set, and he just went to a smaller school. But like we've seen good players come out of NDSU before. It's just the whole thing, but we haven't really seen him against good competition. So the Senior Bowl and those kind of things get really important for a player like that. So that's going to be kind of what his evaluation comes down to, as with all small school kids. But I'm not afraid of a small school kid. He's good at football, and he just dominates these dudes. Like he looks like he doesn't belong amongst that competition. It's not. He was pretty good amongst that level of competition. He dunked on him like he shouldn't have been there, and that kind of tells me a little bit closer that he's NFL caliber. So I'd be pretty excited about that. Even though it's not still on defense, I did get 2 members of the secondary, so I feel okay taking a wide receiver. Adam Thielen's not getting any younger. And you kind of can't have you'll be 4 wide sometimes, somebody gets injured. You can't really have too many wide receivers. So I'm not too worried about any redundancy there. So there you go. Mock draft. Couple of D-backs and a wide receiver. Feels pretty good. I probably would have taken Stingley if I were trying to generate the best draft, but I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about Andrew Booth. So tomorrow is Twitter Tuesday. So get your questions in. You can send them to me at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. Just shoot an email there. There's also a Google form in the show notes. If you'd rather do that, you can just send them to me on Twitter too. Luke Braun NFL, or add Locked On Vikings on Twitter. I will see you all tomorrow. In the meantime, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Learn more about these guys. They're doing a great job over there. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.